This November, the newly redrawn Congressional District 6. Before you head to the polls, KALB is working to get your questions answered so you can make an informed decision on who will best represent your community. Now, from downtown Alexandria, this is the Congressional District 6 debate.
From the Holiday Inn downtown Alexandria in the city of Alexandria, this is the 2024 KALB Louisiana Congressional District 6 debate. I am your host, Colin Vedross, the host of Louisiana Latest and Voice of the People. Tonight, Louisiana will get to see which candidates will be trying to get into the Congressional District 6 seats with viewer-submitted questions followed by a panel of journalists, and we'll decide who will represent Louisiana Congressional District 6. Let's take a quick look at the latest congressional map and where these new districts stand. Now, this all began in January when Jeff Landry, only hours after becoming Louisiana governor, called for a special session on redistricting. Now, in that session, the legislature was tasked with rewriting the state's congressional maps to include more than one black majority district. And so lawmakers proposed a total of 7 different maps, but out of that number, only one made the cut. And now that map, authored by a representative from Central Louisiana, State Senator Quentin, runs from Shreveport through Natchitoches and parts of Central Louisiana all the way down to the Baton Rouge region. Now let's welcome our panel of journalists who, along with myself, will be asking the congressional candidates the questions. And the panelists are from KSLA in Shreveport, anchor and reporter Stephen Maxwell. From KALB right here in Alexandria, weekend anchor and reporter Jay McCulley. From WAFB in Baton Rouge, reporter Chris Rosado. And from the Louisiana Illuminator based in Baton Rouge, editor Greg LaRose. And before we introduce tonight's candidates that are attending, here are the rules for tonight's debates. One panel member will ask the candidates a question. Candidate A will then have 3 minutes to answer, and then candidate B will have 3 minutes to answer. Each candidate will then have a 1-minute rebuttal time. And now, let's welcome the attending candidates who will be trying to represent Louisiana's CD6. Our first candidate tonight first etched his name into the race in March. He's a political newcomer with focus for the district includes tackling crime, criminal justice, and jobs. Let's welcome Democratic congressional candidates Quentin Anthony Anderson. And our second candidate threw his name into the race during qualifying in July. He is an agriculture advocate who is pushing for federal funding to support the state's agriculture industry. Let's welcome Democratic congressional candidate Peter Williams. And let's get to our questions now. We'll start with Jay with our community question.
With division in America at an all-time high, how do you plan to solicit bipartisanship solutions if elected?
Mr. Anderson, you have 3 minutes.
Well, first I want to thank KALB for hosting this debate. It means that you all care about this race and you all care about the representation that this district will get. And in particular, I want to thank Colin for his coverage of this race because I think that it's important that people know that there are options. To answer your question, I am a big proponent of what's called regular order. And I think that that would have a lot of appeal with Democrats, Republicans, everybody except for probably party leadership. And if you're not familiar with regular order, I like to call it going back to schoolhouse rock basics. Every bill starts in committee, no matter what, and if it makes its way out of committee, it gets a vote on the floor. Right now, most bills that pass out of Congress are negotiated by leadership. They're done at the last minute, so everything's an emergency, and they don't include the expertise or perspectives of individual members. And it's no wonder that these omnibus bills end up not really reflecting the values of individual districts because they're not negotiated by the people that represent those districts. I think advocating for regular order in Congress would actually be pretty popular with most members. It means that when you go to Congress, you actually might have a chance of passing something. You might have a chance of making a name for yourself. You might have a chance of making an impact for your community. There's nothing weird about being able to negotiate a bill in the Transportation Committee, lobbying those votes, and if you get it out of committee, you know, having your bill see a vote on the floor. But right now, leadership on both sides of the aisle, Democrats and Republicans, are often trying to block what they think is the bad outcome of a bill, and what they're actually doing is they're circumventing democracy. When voters vote for their congressperson, they are voting with the expectation that that person can actually do something, that when they go back home and they're informed by the issues that their constituents are telling them, that they then can go to D.C. and in committee introduce bills that address those interests, and maybe there's a shot that those bills get a vote on the floor. The honest-to-God truth is right now, as it currently stands, that is a pipe dream. Unless your congressperson is the majority leader or the Speaker of the House, you really don't have an opportunity. to see your district and your representative representing your interests in actual legislation. So I would be a huge proponent of regular order in the House, and I think that I could build a big coalition, bipartisan coalition behind that.
Mr. Williams?
I think because of who we are in sin law, we should not let Washington dictate how we are unified. Leadership starts from the top. And for too long in Washington and even in Louisiana, the division come because we let other people lead us. I think we need to lead ourselves. We have a clear opportunity to do a reset button in Louisiana. This is history to be made. My goal is to incorporate everyone in District 6. The urban, the rural, they have elections all across the state. My job would be to find all of those who run it, all of those who win it. I'm already reaching out to folks that's in these different races across the 6th district. Why? To have one message, a unified voice, because if we're together and if we're unified, I don't think anyone else can separate us. The Bible declares a divided house can't stand. Washington House, the State House, our house. Sin law and the rest of the District 6 have an opportunity to start all over again. This is a prime opportunity. Some folks say it was forced upon us because of spite, because of whatever. Let's take this lemon and make a lemonade. Let's start anew with a vision that we collectively bring together. And if your leader in Congress is going with unity, and the people within the district from all of the other governmental bodies besides, I think we'll be fine. You have a multifaceted district here. We have so many diverse groups. We have some with parish presidents. We have some with police juries. We have some, just like in Marksville, we have the Indian nations that are sovereign government. So we have to find the balance to represent them in a short period of time because we don't have much time. 2 years ago fast. And what I want to do, if sin law and the rest of this district was an experiment, we want it to blow up in their face. And when they come to say redistrict, we'll be so unified. One voice, one community, one district, and it'll be hard for them to change their mind and redo a map. That's how you keep unity, and that's what I think we can do to make it better.
Mr. Anderson, your rebuttal?
Well, you know, I don't have anything really to rebut, but what I would say, because of what he mentioned at the end, there is the real likelihood that this seat gets redistricted again in January. And what I don't want to do is I don't want to diminish people's concerns about geographic representation. I admit that this is not the greatest geographically designed district. I think that it's about a half step forward because we do get racial representation. Short of one of the 5 of us actually campaigning in blackface, it should be a black person that represents us in January.
30 seconds.
And so when we redistrict, I do want to take into account Central Louisiana and North Louisiana's concerns about geographic representation because I think that's just as important as racial representation.
Mr. Williams?
There's 2 clubs, the Republicans and the Republicans and the Democrats. But within the clubs, there are clubs. That's how this map was drawn. And I think we as a group collectively, even with the voice from the Congressional district right now, politics are like this. Who they serve and what is serving and when. If we can show that District 6 can work with the maps that are drawn, I'll be hard pressed
30 seconds.
To fight and let them know why should we be the pawns? Why should we be an experiment? So to just piggyback on everything, even if it gets changed, we have 2 years to do what we need to do in District 6.
All right, let's get to our next question. Stephen, you go.
Hey, thank you both for being here tonight. Kind of going off of what we were just talking about. One thing state lawmakers were saying, it's a vast district, stretching from Shreveport to Baton Rouge, and they're concerned that not everyone's going to be represented fairly. I worked in Alexandria for many years, Shreveport, North Louisiana. One thing we always say is if you're above I-40 or I-20, you're not getting recognized. What are some things specifically you'd like to do in North and Central Louisiana and ensure the voters that, hey, we're looking out for you?
Mr. Williams, you have 3 minutes.
All right. I'm very familiar with sin law. I mean, I've worked in all of the states. There are 7 components that connect the District 6 with urban and rural: agriculture, health, housing, education, transportation, recreation, and incarceration. Not from the incarcerated side, but retention and prevention. USDA sits in Alexandria on Lee Street. 40 million plus budget every year. But where are the dollars going? My job and my goal: accessibility, accountability, and truth. And once I establish those 3 things, I'll get the trust. So to answer your question, we need to find where the federal dollars are, where the programs are, and identify the needs of the people with the local governments so we can start accessing some of those funds. The same families, the same businesses, the same folks, year in and year out, get the same money. Presidents change, they send a director to Alexandria, all they do is change the letterheads, but business stay the same. As a congressional leader, I want accountability. When the funds say they come to Cenlaw, we want to make sure they come to Cenlaw. Also, I want to put in some type of safeguards that no governor, Republican, Democrat, or Independent, refuse any federal dollars. That's ludicrous. Plus, why refuse it? We're already 52% of the budget from the federal government every year. So there's a lot of information that I want to bring to the table to enlighten and educate the families of District 6 so we can make some sound decisions on election day. Thank you.
Mr. Anderson?
Okay. So I think that's right, and it does sort of dovetail what we were just talking about. I think the most important skill that a congressperson can have is the ability to listen, because this is one of the most selfless jobs, if done right, that you can have in the federal government. Your job is, while the folks in your district are at work and they're putting food on the table and a roof over their families' heads, your job is to represent their interests. They don't have the time to vote on the budget or war resolutions or continuing funding resolutions. They need you to be unapologetic and bold in your advocacy for their interests. And one of the things that I've learned during this campaign is that you can go into this campaign with issues that motivated you and that are your North Star and remain your North Star, but the job is to make your community's priorities your priorities. And so I started this campaign talking about criminal justice reform and climate and trying to reduce the brain drain here in Louisiana, and those are still things that motivate me. But now, here in August, I find myself, in Baton Rouge talking about the windfall elimination provision, or talking about finishing the Comeet River Diversion Canal so that we can stop flooding in the northern part of East Baton Rouge Parish. In central Louisiana, I find myself talking about making sure that I'm a strong supporter of the Farm Bill when it comes up for reauthorization, making sure that I'm a supporter of irrigation subsidies or rural broadband. And in North Louisiana, I was just up there learning more about their housing crisis. They just had mass evictions. The biggest part of the job is to go into a community and, one, be willing to acknowledge that you don't have all the answers, that you don't know everything. No matter who gets elected, you didn't come from all over the district, you came from a part of the district. So it's your responsibility to make sure that you are not only getting familiar with their issues, but that you are making those relationships in the district where when something's happening, you know who to call to be able to ask, what's going on? Where is the pain? How is this happening? What do people want me to fight for when I go to DC? And that's been part of the learning process of campaigning. That's why it's so important to actually campaign. That's why you should not vote for somebody who's not on the campaign trail. Because if they don't respect the process, they're not going to respect the job. And the job is to represent the community's interests. Now look, I'm not going to say that we're all going to have the same ideology. I'm a Democrat, there are a lot of Republicans in this district, but the interests remain the same. How I address your interests may be different than the way you might or the way that Garrett Graves might have done it, but your interests remain the same, and so your interests become my top priorities.
Mr. Got 1 minute.
I'm an original District 6 resident. I'm an agriculturalist, I'm a farmer. I planted trees in Louisiana, Arkansas, and Mississippi. I don't need a GPS to get anywhere in Louisiana. I work here. Secondly, married to my wife 43 years. Children grew up in Point Capee, went to public school by choice. I said by choice because the rural community builds us, makes us.
30 seconds.
Lord bless. All 4 of them finished college. Education is prime. My wife and I, so 6 folks from the rural community of Cenlaw have a college degree. Not boasting, but letting them know that commitment is sitting at this table. navigating sin law and the federal government, I could get the job done.
1 minute.
I'm good.
All right, let's go to our third question. Mr. LaRose.
Thanks, and thanks for having me on this panel. The viewers probably noticed that neither the Republican nor Democratic endorsed candidates are taking part tonight. And meanwhile, in Chicago, the Democratic Party is reaching towards an apex of what will be momentum that it hopes to carry into the November 5th election. And I ask each of you as Democrats, how do you break through that establishment ceiling with an endorsed candidate that has name recognition, that has a reputation? What's your message to voters to communicate that, hey, look at your options, take a look at my background, give me a shot?
Mr. Anderson, 3 minutes.
Well, practically speaking, look, I recognize that I don't have universal name ID. If you don't know who I am, that doesn't make you weird. I don't normally seek the spotlight. We got started early because I needed the runway. I announced my campaign in March. We were up in Shreveport in February. I knew that I needed the runway. And in Louisiana, for whatever reason, campaigns start at filing, and that always favors the establishment candidate. It always favors the candidate with money or name recognition. So that was the first thing that I did from a practical standpoint. But from a messaging standpoint, what I've told people is, look, my background is often helping politicians and political organizations frame their messaging, how they can, not speak to the proverbial choir, but actually speak to more than just progressives as they try to get things done. And in that work, I've worked alongside a lot of politicians. And what you learn, whether you're in City Hall, the State House, or Congress, is that time equals seniority and seniority equals influence. And often districts like ours, whether it's at the federal, state, or local level, majority black districts are represented by longtime politicians, people who've been there 20, 30, sometimes 40 years. And these are, in politics, that equals cachet. That usually means that you're the chairman of something. You get to dictate the terms of some of these bills. And yet, it is often our districts, the ones that are represented by longtime politicians, sometimes chairmen of powerful committees, that are the ones that see the most disinvestment, that are the ones where schools are closing down, that are the ones where the roads look like crap. Why is that? Is it because these politicians aren't accruing political capital? No, they absolutely are. That's how they're becoming chairmen of committees. But what they know, and what unfortunately we know in our community, is a history of disappointment. And they know they can go back to our communities and tell them, man, you know how them white folks are. I tried my best, but I just couldn't do it. But that's not true. What they're doing is they're cutting deals that are bad for the community, good for them personally, and end up setting us back. So my message to voters has been, if that's the sort of representation that you want, then sure, vote for the guy that you've been voting for the last 30 years, for the guy that somehow says that he's picking up where he left off 30 years ago, despite the fact that that's not how Congress works.
1 minute left.
If you actually want representation that's going to represent your interests, then vote for the candidates that are actually asking you for your vote. Vote for the candidates that are actually answering questions, that actually have positions on issues. Don't vote for a mystery box just because it's always been in the kitchen. Vote for somebody that's actually answering the questions that relate to your interests, your community's interests, and your children's interests. And I think that that's what we've done. We've been campaigning. Not everybody has. Don't vote for somebody that isn't.
Mr. Williams?
Yeah. To answer your question, I fought against the Democrats and the Republicans for 40 years as an advocacy person. And if I want to be bad, I can say as a DEI advocate for equality and inclusion. The Democratic Party is fractured, been fractured. They had a paradigm shift in Louisiana in 2015 when the Democrats and the Republicans cut a deal to not get Senator Vedross when he ran. From that time, I call it a gumbo politic game. They get these layaway politicians who come out just for election or just for civil rights events and put a price tag on it to say that they're representing the people. I ran for Congress in 2014 with Edwin Edwards and Gary Gray. I just recently ran in 2019 against Commissioner Mike Strand, Commissioner of Agriculture. Knowing that the lines were already drawn, knowing that I couldn't win, but that didn't stop me from advocating for a sin law for the families who've been left out. So as far as the club, they don't faze me. And it was a game being played because in the last election, only 36% of the voters voted. Out of 3 million people, okay? 2,200,000 people stayed home. 880,000 folks voted, 545 for Jeff Landry, 245 for Mr. Wilson, and 54 for Mr. Waggerspank. But you know what that's telling me? Sin law can't afford to let a minority tell them what to do in District 6 with this new district. If you want to get scary, the 64% that didn't vote, if we have a recall, none of them would have a job. So let's be real with what's happening. So the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, and the candidates are not here. We know they're nothing but pawns, and they're only doing what they're doing because they think the game has already been played. But we got news for them. He might have baked the cake when they drew the line, but we're gonna have a party and they won't eat some. And it's gonna start at sin law. And being bold is what we're gonna be. Being vocal is what we're gonna be. Because if it's gonna be a new date, we do not have to be afraid, because guess what, we're starting fresh. Sin law, we didn't have anything, we're gonna start fresh, and the budget, let's overflow it so we could catch up. That's what I feel about it.
Your rebuttal?
I'm just always enthusiastic. I always get energy from Mr. Williams. Yeah, he's just good. He's good. That's all I got. Yeah.
Mr. Williams, your rebuttal?
No, I'm all right.
Okay. All right. So we'll toss things over to break. We'll be right back in a couple minutes. You're watching the Louisiana Congressional District 6 debate right here on KALB.
You're watching the Congressional District 6 debate on KALB.
And welcome back to the KALB Louisiana Congressional District 6 debates. We're on our fourth question now, so we'll head over to Chris Rosado for that one.
Well, gentlemen, thank you both for being here tonight. As I'm sure you're both well aware of what we like to call the brain drain, where Louisiana's youngest, brightest are leaving in droves to start lives in other states, what for a variety of reasons, whether it be education, job opportunities, healthcare, property insurance. So my question to both of you is, how do you plan to address the specific needs of young people in District 6, particularly in terms of education, job opportunities, and mental health support?
Mr. Williams, you have 3 minutes.
Okay. Once again, let's start from the top. Those 7 components I talked about: agriculture, health, housing, education, transportation, recreation, and incarceration. If you drive on Lee Avenue and look at USDA parking lot, it's full of cars. But how many folks from Sinlaw? How many folks driving in and getting these $80,000, $100,000 a year jobs? Working with the universities, LSU, all the different other schools in the area. Those 7 programs that I talked about have some great interns. I have already put about 42 young kids. I even had a couple from Peabody, got into USDA internship programs with NRCS, USDA. So it's gonna have to be that unified conversation again. Labor, workforce development, job training, renewable energy is great. We have solar panels coming in. A lot of people talking about different things. Marketing, USDA have some of the greatest jobs, soil samples, water analysis. I mean, there are jobs that the folks are not aware of. So that's where that accessibility come in. Letting the schools know in prep, the qualifications, the curriculum that need to be taught at some of the schools. Maybe have some, back in the day when I came up, we had a little CETA training program, that's a way back. And it's a job training program. So it helps the children and it helps the young adults. And to keep them here, we have to let them know, when you graduate, you have a job. But let me tell you what we have in the system. We have career folks holding these jobs. They're getting jobs. You fill an application, next thing you know, the job is taken. Why? Because some cousin or some brother or some nephew kept the job. You have young men and women that are qualified, have to be twice as qualified. Not necessarily because they're black, not because they're white, but because they're in the wrong area. They have the wrong name, they have the wrong political. What you have to understand, we have to keep it real. Nepotism is alive and well. Friendship and good old boy system is alive and well. You will have great children, great young adults graduating, but they meet these barriers, and when they meet the barriers, they flee. We have to clean up the foolishness in administration.
30 seconds.
We have to clean up those that are in charge of bringing the wealth down to the bottom. And I think once we do that, and the young people see that there are some opportunities, but when there's none and word get out, So I think a communication from the top down and holding them accountable. Holding them accountable. That's how we can help.
Mr. Williams, 3 minutes, or Mr. Anderson, sorry.
Yeah, so look, I think that the easy answer is, we're going to attract more jobs and we're going to make the economy post-graduation more attractive. But Louisiana historically has bent over backwards trying to bring new industries to the state, oftentimes not asking people to pay any taxes at all, which is kind of maybe not the best short-term or long-term strategy. But we've tried those sort of things. And that's not what brings jobs. That's not what's going to make Louisiana more attractive. That's not what is going to bring us into the 21st century. It's our political culture here. When Louisiana is viewed by everybody, including the young people that grow up here, as backwards, when the policies that we're passing sound more like something you might learn about during the civil rights movement than something that would pass in 2023 or 2024, when anybody and everybody can have a gun, people don't want to be here. People don't want to grow here. They don't think that there's a future here. So the first thing that you have to address is the political culture and the political climate here. You do have to address the cronyism and the nepotism. That's a very big deal here. The fact that, in some parishes, including my own, there are like 3 families that own the entire the entire bench. That's not okay. It's not okay that usually the government contracts go to the cousin of the mayor or the governor or something like that. That's not okay, and nobody wants to move to that. In 2024, you're no longer competing with just your neighboring towns. We are a much more connected society. You are competing with Atlanta and Miami and Los Angeles and Houston. And if that doesn't sound fair, life's not fair. We have to do a better job of making sure that not only our district, but our state is attractive to people when they're comparing it to all the other places that they could go. And right now, when you compare Louisiana to other states, we seem like a backward state politically. We seem like a place where you have to, kind of be in with the good old boys to have any sort of success. And that's not a place anybody wants to start their career. It's not a place where anybody wants to start a business. It's not a place where somebody wants to bring new jobs, where they have to move people in and they have to adjust to that culture. Nobody wants to bring them to a place that feels like it's regressive. And I'm not talking about, politically progressive, but we need to be progressive in the sense of we need to prioritize diversity. We need to prioritize making Louisiana seem like it's a place where anybody and everyone can start their life and prosper here. We need to make it so that you don't have to take a $20,000, $30,000 pay cut for the same job anywhere else to stay here. It should not be a public service sacrifice to live in Louisiana. It should be attractive. It should be fun. It should be full of possibility. And it's not that, because we have a corrupt political culture here where everybody is bought and paid for, and nobody has an interest in actually moving the state forward. If we want people to stay here, we have to actually start thinking about what makes Louisiana look prime for the future. And right now, our political culture is holding us back.
Mr. Williams, your 1-minute rebuttal.
It's more of a piggyback on what I said earlier instead of rebuttal. We need to get federal government accountability. We need to get banks on board, because there are small businesses that's not getting the loans to create the jobs that our young people need. Once again, we go back to that circle of friendship. Over-collateralizing one business versus under-collateralizing another.
30 seconds.
Because of who they are and how they look. So I think there's a lot of soul searching and a lot of just cleaning up from the top down that need to be done. And calling it how we see it to create the opportunities for the young people that want to stay here, especially in rural Louisiana.
Mr. Anderson?
Yeah, and just because I do want to make sure I actually give some sort of policy prescriptions as opposed to just indicting the system. I want to make sure that we have federal funds that make it easier for people to start businesses here. I don't want us always looking for the Amazon or the Intel. I want us to actually be seeding the next Amazon and Intel. So I want the thing that makes it attractive to be here, the fact that Louisiana and the federal government will invest in you to stay here. Mental health access is a really big deal, especially because I think a lot of people don't understand that a lot of mental health professionals do not accept your normal insurance, which makes it all the more difficult for people to get access. I do want to figure out how to address that loophole so that mental health professionals are getting compensated at the same rate as every other health professional. Therefore, your insurance will cover your ability to be able to get access to mental health. If we keep saying that it's critical, then we need to also act like it's critical. And right now, it's treated as optional. It's very expensive. It's like $400 for me a month, and that is tough when I'm practically self-funding a campaign. It's not practical for most people.
Gentlemen, I'll ask this question. So with the new political landscape this year, with Governor Landry becoming the Republican governor for Louisiana, as well as 5 congressional district seats in Congress that are also in the Republican seat, you would be throwing a wrench with 4 now and then having 2 in that seat on the Democratic side. How crucial is this election for the Democratic vote, and how crucial is it for moving forward into Congress if you do end up getting this vote? I'll start with you, Mr. Anderson.
Well, I'll be real with you. This is not the most crucial, but in an era where a lot of these majority margins can be razor thin, I think every Democrat matters if you care about the Democratic agenda. But what I always caution people with is, you know, we're asking to be elected to a body with 434 other people, and then there are 100 other people in the other chamber. So there are 534 people that you have to work with, and you have to work with who they represent and all of that. And so I don't want anybody under this impression that whoever gets elected is going to be dictating the terms. I know that one of the candidates, I don't believe that he's here, I know that one of the candidates keeps asserting that the reason it's so critical that we elect him is because of the seniority that he would have. I want to be clear, he would be the most junior member of our congressional delegation, even with the argument that he's making. So this is not about sort of the influence of this seat in Congress. What I actually think the great value of this seat can be is what sort of voice it has here in Louisiana. While yes, it'll be a vote in D.C., this is also a bully pulpit. This is a seat that can actually shine a light on a lot of the issues happening here in Louisiana. It's a seat that can stand up to Governor Landry. It's a seat that can stand up to the extreme right-wing legislature. You know, this is work that I've been doing in my private capacity, and it is work that I intend to continue doing if I get elected congressman, just having that additional bullhorn to be able to make the light a little bit brighter on the issues that I think are most critical to Louisiana here at home. So I think that the influence really comes here at home. I think in D.C., it's really important to kind of keep up the momentum on some of the bipartisan issues that Louisiana representatives have been fighting for. But I'm not going to lie to you. I'm going to be member 435. Mr. Williams will be member 435. Mr. Fields will be member maybe 432. I'll give him that. But at the end of the day, this is more about what the person does with this seat. It's about how they represent your interests and how boldly and unapologetically they represent your interests. It's not so much about, you know, you're not electing the next Speaker of the House, but you are electing somebody who in every single day they're going to be in negotiations where your interests are on the table, and it's about who you believe when the doors close isn't going to compromise on those issues.
Mr. Williams, 3 minutes.
Okay. I feel that Sin Law and District 6 right now, we're sitting in a prime position. One, you're not getting a rubber stamp. I'm Democrat, I'm conservative, but I'm progressive enough to understand that the poor are going to be with you always. You have to have the safety nets. First Amendment rights, all for it. But let me share something. The way they drew the map, whether they drew them hastily or not, we connected to other congressional districts. Higgins, Mike Johnson, Ms. Ledlow. And what you have to understand also, when we go to Washington, we should not be divided. We're supposed to be representing Louisiana's agenda, not 4 or 5 Republicans or 4 Republicans and 2 Democrats. How about one congressional delegation going to Washington, D.C. to take care of the business of the people? And that's where your leadership come in from this seat. Because if you want to play the game of old, if you want to dance to the music of the Democrats or the Republicans, but I can't let Washington tell me what we need in Lower Third. I can't let Washington tell me about the flooding on Willow Glen. I can't let Washington dictate the problem we had in Gina in 2011 with the juvenile 6. Why? Because those things are in our young people's mind. So when I go to Washington, D.C., sure, they're going to see a Democratic candidate, but one thing they're really going to know, we don't know which way he's going. Why? Because I'm going to go District 6 first, Louisiana second, Washington third. Now they might say, well, what kind of thing is that? I want to take care, if we're going to have a 2-year wonder, we're going to take care of our business for 2 years. They give me a budget tomorrow, they're going to say, Mr. Williams, your budget is out, send me some more. Because I need to play catch up.
1 minute left.
And on the real side, no jesting. This district was made for a reason. People, 1/3 of Louisiana have been left out. Senator Congressman Gray's been my congressman for 10 years. I saw him one time. Miss Lettsworth, she been in the 5th district after she took over for her husband. Some folks don't even know how to contact her. Not down in them.
30 seconds.
But that's just the way of business. But a new way of business is accessibility, accountability, truth, which you're hearing tonight, and I want to gather your trust so I can get your vote on November 5th.
Mr. Anderson, in 1 minute.
Yeah, I just want to emphasize that it is still, though, important that, if you get something done. And so I think that there's a balance. I think it's important to have independent representation. I absolutely agree with Mr. Williams on that. I think, in particular, in this state, that is very rare. All of our politicians are bought and paid for in some way, shape, or form. But you are, like I mentioned, you are going to a body with 434 other representatives that they are charged with representing their district as passionately as I'm going to represent mine. And so knowing what that give and take looks like, knowing that my district can't afford for me not to bring progress back. They can't afford for me to do what I criticized earlier, which is to go back to the district and say, oh man, you know how they are, I tried my best. They need me to do something. So if I can move the needle an inch or a mile, I feel an obligation to always get progress done. And that means working with people that sometimes you don't agree with all the time, but trying to figure out how can I get at least a little bit of my constituents' interests advanced in this instance, or maybe sometimes more than that. But that's always critical for me.
Mr. Williams?
I think the most important thing going to Washington, D.C. is maintaining what we have working. Our agriculture and forestry community is the breadbasket for CENLA and the state. And also now start tapping in to the areas where we fell short. Can't do it all, but keep what you have, bring those who've been left out for so long, and find a middle ground. But one thing I could tell you.
30 seconds.
Joe Manchin held Washington, D.C. at a standstill because he wasn't a rubber stamp. And we know about leverage in Louisiana. Leverage means you want my vote, and District 6 need $20 million. Or are you selling your vote? I just heard a guy say, send me $1 billion and I'll do anything you want with regulation. So anyway, it's a way to work it out. And I want to work for District 6 first.
All right, thank you, sir. We'll turn things over to Jay for our next question.
Mr. Anderson, you briefly touched on healthcare earlier, and healthcare is one of the main issues for voters, especially when they're considering candidates. And this district has a huge shortcoming in healthcare professionals, especially in the rural parts of the state. So if either of you were elected, how would you handle this crisis?
Mr. Williams, 3 minutes.
Okay. Healthcare start at an early age. Health issues. I've been wrestling with the Ritalin problem in our young elementary schools in African-American boys and girls for 20 years. I've also been wrestling with the educational problems where when a child is deemed slow learner or in special ed as a baby, there's no graduation from that cycle. We keep them on drugs until they're 18. Then we cut them loose with nobody to take them from left over. To answer your question, we have to have the house, the home. If you're a product of your environment, mental health starts at home. We living in overcrowded conditions. Grandmothers, great-grandmothers, 4 and 5 families in one home. Well, how that's mental health, Mr. Williams? We overcrowded, we stress. We have a food shortage. We have insecurity eating. All of those things bring mental health problems. But to answer your question, we have to make it a priority. We have to start targeting them at an early age. We have to start identifying the symptoms that may lead them to progressive mental health problems. Those that's coming from the military that may have it. Those that's coming off of drugs that may have it. But let me tell you what you have. You have healthcare professionals, but they're in it for the dollar. They'll give me a treatment plan, not me. They'll give a treatment plan, and the next thing you know, they'll send you out because you done did your 10 days, you done did your 15 days. Why you put a cap on somebody's health? So I think from Congress, we need to start prioritizing mental health like they do oil and gas. Start prioritizing.
1 minute.
start prioritizing mental health treatment like you do any other treatment. Because health care is supposed to be a right, and it should not be based on whether you have enough people or whether you have enough money. And I'll be the voice for those who have the mental health care problem. Because when you have a mental health care problem, you can't be a law-abiding citizen. So to that degree, I would seek the nursing schools, the universities, let them know we have a shortage. Now you're putting them in a pathway to going to the mental health care field, guaranteeing them an opportunity for a job when they get out. So we have to kind of balance that out and connect the dot with the mental health care profession and the needs of that service.
Mr. Anderson? So I agree with Mr. Williams that healthcare is a right. And I think that in 2009, 2010, I'm very proud of my party for passing the Affordable Care Act. I know Obama lamented the other day that now that it's popular, they don't call it Obamacare anymore. But I still lovingly call it Obamacare. That was my first full-time boss. So I am very proud of what we did. And what we also did was I think we changed the conversation about sometimes the positive role that government can have in people's lives, which is sort of a classic conservative versus liberal argument that has kind of gotten lost in this sort of cult of culture that we're fighting in right now. But when we say that healthcare is a right, when we say that anything is a right, what we are saying is a very specific legal argument. We're saying that government now has an obligation to make sure that you have pathways to that right. Doesn't mean that we always pay for it. If you can afford to pay for it, then you pay for it yourself. But if you can't, or if you have other obstacles, the government has an obligation to make sure that you can overcome those obstacles, whether that's through subsidies or anything else like that. The first thing that I want to do is I want to fund a public health system. And I think that's, unfortunately, that starts in places like Louisiana, where we defunded our charity hospital system. It was a charity hospital system that helped a lot of people. My mom, maybe a decade ago, a little bit more than that, yeah, now I'm getting older. A little bit more than that, when I was in law school, she broke both of her ankles in Lafayette while she was actually, she was a navigator for the ACA. She was going across the state trying to talk to people about what Medicaid expansion would look like. And she broke both of her ankles, not in Lafayette, actually here in Alexandria. And she did not, at the time, have health care. And if it was not for Earl K. Long in my hometown of Baton Rouge, my mom would not have been able to get the procedures done on her ankles. That system saved a lot of lives. That system delivered a lot of babies. That system was there for the people that don't have the luxury to go to fancy hospitals, that don't get employer-provided insurance. I want to see those charity systems come back. I want to see a public health system established so that we ensure that access to health care. Look, if you can pay for it, go wherever you want. If you're in a place where it's right around the corner, that's great. But there are places right here in central Louisiana where people are miles away, and they may not have quality public transportation. We need to use federal dollars to make sure that they have access, whether that means subsidizing their trips to the nearest provider or funding providers in those places where you have healthcare deserts. The federal government has an obligation, if we say that we believe healthcare is a right, to paving a road of access to that right. And right now we're not doing that, particularly in states like Louisiana, where it's some of the poorest people and we're keeping them from some of the most necessary resources, like health care.
Mr. Williams, you have 90 seconds.
Okay. To get your part about not having enough in rural communities, because the district is so big, I would propose a satellite office in each parish with real people answering the phone, with real people identifying what's going on. By doing so, you can have that assessment that we were talking about. Right now, if you call certain offices, you ask them to get some help, they'll send you to someone who asks somebody else to get some help, and before you know it, you don't get some help. So, rural communities, the food deserts, all of the places that are lacking, by having that Congressional satellite office in there, now you can identify the services. Now you can regulate and monitor the service. Right now you have no monitoring. You have nobody that's accountable to anyone. So it has to start with accountability. And I think that's how we could at least start moving toward, the key is if I know where I'm gonna get help, I'm already starting to feel better. But if I keep going around circles, I'm gonna get more depressed and I'll just keep going in circles. So expanding and making opportunities for assessment with information and locations, I think that would be a good way to start.
I don't have a rebuttal, but my story did remind me to, hi, Mom. I know that you're watching, and you've organized a debate watching party, so I just wanted to make sure that I called you out. I know this is a little weird, but I'll use that time for that. But that's it.
All right, we'll go to Stephen Maxwell for our next question.
Yeah, I just want to stay on the topic of health care. There's a real possibility that there could be a Medicare for All bill, possibly make its way through Congress. Vice President Kamala Harris is proposing that. Is that something you would support, and what would you propose?
Absolutely. Whatever form that takes. When I say that healthcare is a right, I don't say that as a platitude. I think that this is one of those things where it's very weird here in the United States that we treat healthcare like it's a commodity, that you get more of it the more money you have. The implication is that you can be too poor to live. And that's a ridiculous outcome. And it's not one that any good person I know believes in. It's not one that any Christian I know believes in. It's not one that any Jew I know believes in. No Muslim I know believes in that. Nobody of faith I know believes in that. And so if we want to practice what we preach, we need to make every pathway to health care available. If you can pay for it, then pay for it. If you want some fancy Cadillac insurance plan, absolutely pay for it. Nobody's going to stop you from doing it. But there are people that cannot pay for health insurance right now. There are people that need to walk into a hospital and may not have, all the fancy resources that the rest of us might have, but they need help. And they shouldn't have to hand over a credit card to be able to get that assistance. They shouldn't be given a bill to be able to get healthy again. If we have a cure for something, everybody needs to have access to it. If we can give you the medicine that you need, everybody needs to have access to it. If there's a doctor nearby, you should not have to check your bank account before you decide whether or not you're going to go and get a checkup. And right now, we have made healthcare a commodity. I believe that healthcare is a right. So if there's a Medicare for All bill, if there is a public option that comes up, whatever, if there's any sort of single payer option that's available, I'm going to vote for it because, like I said, I believe that healthcare is a right. That's a non-negotiable for me.
Yes. Yeah, I would support healthcare and Medicare for All, and also I would put an emphasis on prevention. I would put an emphasis on having certain areas designated to render those services. Reason being, you will always have the private versus public. You will always have shortcuts when you're giving free health care. We have a problem now with our mothers, black mothers. Infant mortality rate. Black women dying at a rate alarming, more than any other race. Why? Don't have OBGYN areas in rural communities. Do not have the transportation to go. So if you're gonna give me health care, give me a ride. If you're gonna give me a ride,
1 minute.
Make sure that the doctor that I'm going to is giving me the real care that I need. And that dollar is not more important than my health. So I'm gonna support it. But I'm gonna support it with some serious caveats. Because I know in Louisiana, we have a lot of different diseases. One that could be prevented, and two that can be treated. But are they really being treated? Because as long as you have that Medicaid and Medicare card, and I could swipe it and you come in once a month, and I could do a cash flow and a bottom line based on how many visits you make, I'm questioning your integrity, Doc. So we want to make sure that everybody is fair and right, accessible, accountable, and truth, so we can trust them.
Mr. Anderson, 45 seconds for your rebuttal.
Yeah, I think people forget that one of the things that was happening when we were trying to pass the ACA was up until Ted Kennedy passed away, we actually included a public option in the ACA. And what that would have done is, alongside all the private plans, there would have been a government-provided plan. And people poo-poo about that because they think that it's Big Brother, but what it really would have done is the government doesn't have to make a profit. So it would have kept every other insurance plan honest. They probably wouldn't have gone to the government level, but it would have actually taken off a lot of that excess profit that they're getting off of your plan. If we can't pass a Medicare for all, the one thing I absolutely am going to fight for is the inclusion of that public option, and that's not about big government. It's about lowering your prices. Most of the people that will be on it are people that need it. Most of the people that will be impacted are the people that have health insurance now, and it will lower your costs.
Mr. Williams, 45 seconds.
Prevention, we have early child care, we have Head Start. All of them have all of the medical treatments. We just have to monitor that mother that may have that mental health crisis. We may have to help that grandmother who don't know how to drive. So it's gonna have to come back to some compassion in our system, because a lot of people are eligible for programs, but they just cannot maximize them, one reason or another. And you say, oh, well, you can't be big brother for everybody, or you can't. If it take a community to raise a child, what about taking a District 6 to re-raise our community? And let's show them that we can make it work together. Thank you.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. And we'll get to our closing statements now. We'll start with Mr. Anderson. You have 90 seconds.
So this district, this seat, is an opportunity for us. Like I mentioned before, there are 5 black men that are on the ballot. So, barring some very, very surprising revelation, it will be a black person that is representing this district in January. But it matters what kind of person that we elect. It matters what sort of advocacy that you're going to get in Washington. I mentioned before that oftentimes it's our districts that are represented by longtime politicians that are very powerful. They just don't use that power for us. What I'm asking you to do in this election is I'm asking you just to take a step back. Really seriously think about who you're voting for. Are you voting for somebody because of what their stance is on reproductive rights? Are you voting for them because of what their stance is on flooding? Are you voting for them because of what their stance is on agricultural policy? Or are you voting for them because somebody you know told you to vote for them? Or are you voting for them because you've always voted for them, because it's a name that you recognize? All I'm asking voters to do today is think about who you're voting for. Are you voting for somebody that is addressing your interests? Is it somebody that has asked you for your vote? Or are you voting for somebody that you've been told to vote for? This seat is so important. Representation is important, but bold, unapologetic representation is what matters. It doesn't matter just to have somebody that looks like you. It matters to have somebody that's gonna fight for you, and that's why I'm running. I'm Quentin Anthony Anderson, I'm running for Congress, and I'm asking you for your vote.
All right, Mr. Wood.
It's a clear picture. The way the districts are drawn, 6 of the 10 parishes or areas in this district are agriculture, forestry, poetry, and based on that is the base. All of the businesses around Cenla and in this district make it because of the agriculture and forestry communities. The backbone of Louisiana is agriculture and forestry. Sure, I'm an ag guy, but I'm a businessman. Resource One Nursery started in 1999. One of my signature projects is Honey Break. We planted 7,500 acres at Honey Break, now they're the Mecca Lodge of the Delta. I'm a fighter, been fighting the club, been coming against them, been advocating. This is nothing new to me. And I have nothing to lose. Nothing to lose, but everything to gain, because there's a gain in coming together, because the club want us to fail. That's why they did the map, they did it. Outlined Baton Rouge, outlined Shreveport, outlined Lafayette, and left the rural communities in the middle with nobody to speak for them but Peter Williams, number 24. So they're in trouble. Thank you. Appreciate your vote and your prayers.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, and thank you for watching us on the Congressional District 6 debate. Now, before we go, you do have to be registered to vote to pick your next Congressional District 6 congressman, and you can apply to register in person at any registrar of voters office, as well as the Office of Motor Vehicles and several other state entities. You can also register to vote online at sos.la.gov. The in-person and by-mail registration deadline is October 7th, and the online registration deadline is October 15th. Well, from all of us at KALB, thank you so much for watching tonight. And don't forget to go to the polls on November 5th as we get to decide the first representative for the newly redrawn Louisiana Congressional District 6. Good night from Cenla.